All right, thanks for having me, everybody. I want to ask the audience a quick question. How many of you like co-working spaces? Come on, you got to raise your hand. We're in one right now. Okay, thank you. All right, well, as an entrepreneur, I love co-working spaces. They're flexible. They create a sense of community in which I can network and share ideas with other companies. But let me ask you one other question. How many of you are actively practicing medicine? Nursing, hospital administration? No? Well, that's a major pain point for healthcare startups, is that they need access to those people. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. Myself, a physician assistant, I work with a lot of the medical community and their associations. Scott Pope is a pharmacist who works with the corporations and hospital systems. We both love the startup community, and we both love the Charlotte community. Between the two of us, we really have the ecosystem covered. But we know nothing about co-working spaces, property management, finance, so we built a team of advisors to help us in that area. Oh, wrong way. And went out asking questions to the healthcare professionals. We said, if we built this, where would it need to be located for you to travel to? What types of events and activities would we need to put on for you to attend? And what types of virtual tools, if any, would you be willing to adopt? We used that information to create a concept, took that concept to the healthcare associations and said, if we build this, would you do your events and activities there and bring all your members? And they've signed letters of intent saying that they would. We then went to the entrepreneurial associations, look, there's PitchBreakfast, and asked the same thing and got letters of intent saying that they would. We then took those, went to the healthcare startup community in Charlotte and said, would you be willing to move into this type of space? How much space would you need, and how much would you be willing to pay for it? And we have letters of intent to fill about 75% of our soon-to-be 20,000 square feet of co-working space. We then went to the corporations in the area and said, we have the healthcare professionals, their associations, the entrepreneurial groups and their content, and all the healthcare startups. How would you like to put your name on the wall? And we threw in a few other perks for the donors, and they said they would. Thus, Mito Station and the Healthcare Innovation Center were born. Mito Station is Charlotte's first and only healthcare co-working space, and the Innovation Center is a non-for-profit event space and resource center funded partially by Mito Station, but mostly by the healthcare corporations. What I like about this model is, first of all, I'm not going to tell you it's a 25x return on investment like WeWork, but it does have a decent margin, and we really mitigate the cost and therefore our risk by having most of our cost contributed through donations from the corporations. And there still is some potential for growth, right? We think with the growth of Charlotte and the medical school coming, that we could easily build something triple the size in 5 years, as long as we establish ourselves and our brand. And we could always purchase the property and triple our revenues. In addition, we offer certain advantages, just like our donors, of access to that entrepreneurial community. So, good. So we're seeking about $200,000 in total, which will cover mostly furnishings, and a lot of it is just to cover risk for the first several months of startup. And we're offering 20% equity stake, mostly to strategic investors only, who will have some ancillary benefit for being involved in that ground stage entrepreneurial world. So I am way early on time. I'll just go right to the questions. All right. Now, hold on.
It's a good thing you had extra time. It's helped me figure out the microphone.
All right, should work.
All right. Oh, there we go. Very cool. Cool. So you had a little bit of extra time. How much time did you have left over, by the way? Do you know?
Almost a minute.
Almost a minute.
I normally aim for 4.5.
Okay. Good. So, I think you're the first person who had their pitch in that short period of time. I had seen a few people who had it like at 4:59 was a guy from the military, so he knew about precision. The Air Force in particular. So anyway, so you've got a little bit of room to add in content. I think as part of your practice, do that. My suggestion actually is to probably spend a little bit less time in the background. I think you do a very good job establishing the problem. And maybe contribute, talk a little bit more about your revenue model, right? I mean, we kind of understand what it'll be, but what will that look like, you know, and how are you going to make sure that you don't fall down the trap of where we work as an example? So I think I would spend a little bit more time on the finances. You had your finance slide, being a finance guy, right? It was all words. I would suggest some kind of chart or something else that kind of shows, you know, here's what it looks like in different increments. You've got a fractional CFO advisor. I would suggest getting his input and getting, if you haven't already, get his help in terms of mapping that out, showing what that looks like, especially as it relates to what an investor would want to see. Overall, going through the 5 points very quickly, you identified the problem. The market, I think you could probably strengthen a little bit as well. What really is the market? I mean, you had names of companies, but how big is that for sure? Talk about the revenue side. I think we should be a little clearer on that. You talk about funding, what you're looking for, and what you'll do with it. So, so I'd say you had, let's say, 3.5 out of 5. So kind of hone in on those other points, and I think you could really well round this out to 5 minutes and really deliver your message.
Okay, thank you.
Couple things. One, I think you need just a little more energy. I talked to you before, and you were so much more enthusiastic when you weren't pitching, so bring some of that from the room. And then I'd love to know if this model exists elsewhere. I assume it does, and how you came up with the idea. And then one other thing that I want to know from you. So I saw Scott Pope's name with another company listed on that Excel spreadsheet, and then I did talk to you before and know you have other companies. So I wonder about commitment and how the two of you are planning to make this thing go with multiple ventures.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I would say I echo what Betsy just said in that, you know, at one point you brought up a nonprofit, right? And you brought up, you know, kind of the company to the left, and that really threw me for a loop, right? Because if I'm going to invest in you, you know, and I'm going to have a minority stake in this business, right? I want to know that this is what you're doing full time, that you really care about it, you're passionate about it. So I was a little bit confused, and maybe you could elaborate on the kind of fit between the two, because it showed up on one slide, this nonprofit, but then it just kind of disappeared, and I didn't really know. I felt myself pulling back when you brought that up.
Anything else? Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, so elaborate on that a little bit. How do they fit together? Why
so
two?
The nonprofit is not yet established. We are in talks with a lot of existing nonprofits, and they are typically ones that would manage the space. Our only job would be to, you know, fill the co-working space and so forth. You know, it's tricky because I can only say so much on the slide at this point. We're still a few weeks away from finalizing that. Originally, this was built as a 10-minute deck, and I pulled out a few things, and I think those were some of the key things you guys were talking about. It's not easy to take out a slide versus try to merge two others and so forth. But yeah, so a lot of those types of questions are still unanswered. You know, we started this about 1.5 years ago, just talking about it, getting letters of intent, pre-selling something that didn't exist. And at this point, some of it still doesn't exist. Like, you know, it's just in theory, we will use a nonprofit entity so that we can collaborate with the hospital systems, for example.
So is there a model like this that you're replicating from a different region?
Yes, there's nothing exactly like it because most of them have an affiliation where we are affiliation neutral. So in the bigger deck, we have a slide and we point out what Matter does in Chicago, which is healthcare oriented and has a lot of startups from around the world coming. And I also look at the QC FinTech model, which is local here in Charlotte, but in financial technology. So we kind of point out the two and the similarities that Charlotte could do, what we do with QC FinTech, but also, you know, in the medical model like they do in Chicago.
Would you intend to keep this in Charlotte or expand to other geographies?
We would like to expand it. I've already actually had people from 2 other cities reach out to us and ask us if we could show them how we did this. However, I will say that we'll probably run each one independent. My feeling on a city's ecosystem is everyone's unique, so you really need local people to drive it. We would get involved simply as far as helping some of the operations, and that's why we want to use an existing nonprofit that maybe works with co-working spaces already, because they've gone through those pains.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate a point that I made earlier about the time management or the content management, I guess, really is what it's about. So I want you to be thinking about your business from different audiences' point of view. And I say the audience point of view because you want to be thinking about who you're talking to, right? What's the message you're delivering? What are the parameters in the situations? And I said earlier that it could be in an elevator, right? You got 3 sentences, right? Or you may be at a networking function, you got 3 sentences, and you got to think about what those 3 sentences are and know them cold. Here you've got 5 minutes. I wouldn't take a 10-minute slide and try to make it into a 5-minute slide. I'd create a 5-minute slide deck. And again, then you're thinking about your content, what your message is, who your audience is, and have it prepared. Have a 10-minute one and even have a 30-minute one, because there will be a time, there very well could be a time, where you're going to be standing up and really asking for that money and be pitching this, and you'll need to get into a little more depth. So really kind of think about your audiences in all those different situations. I think you mentioned, Betsy, about energy levels and all that. All that comes tied together, right? It's a level of confidence about what you were trying to communicate and who you're in front of and what it is you're trying to deliver.
Okay. And I will answer audience questions, but I have one question specifically for Joshua. Being the only medical doctor in the room, my pitch is specifically for doctors or healthcare professionals, strategic affiliations and backgrounds. Our pitches are scheduled in a few weeks from now, so this is my first chance to practice it. Given the audience is going to be very specific, do you feel I need to do anything with my pitch for that audience in particular?
I'd say for that audience or for any audience that you present to, I need to feel like you believe, right? I want to know that you're committed to this, and you don't have anything else going on, and this is number one in your life, right? So when you're in the shower at night, when you're to the covers in the morning, when you're in the office, that this is what you're going to live. Because for me to believe, I need you to convince me that you believe. And I think that's for a medical professional. I think that's for any type of investor. That really needs to come across.
Thank you.
All right. Panel, any other questions?
I don't know the audience.
We've got about a little time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. If anybody in the audience has some.
Yes.
Eric, so what is your, right, so you've got different people that you're trying to attract, right? The startups, so for example, a medical startup who's just coming into the ecosystem, what is your value proposition kind of?
Sure. Yeah, good question. So the classic value proposition of any co-working space, we have flexible leasing terms, sense of community and specific to healthcare. We have, all the classic ones, but for healthcare company specific, we're building our amenities and our resources around, and it took us a while to figure out what the identity of Charlotte would be, and we have a ton of healthcare technology companies, so we're not putting in wet labs or anything like that, or research stations. We're doing a lot of stuff around the technology for them, and again, we're pushing all that into a nonprofit space that's available to anybody in the community, but it's located very strategically next to our co-working space. The additional value proposition, which I think is key, is we have all the medical associations coming in doing their meetings and their activities there. We have physicians lounge in there that they can come hang out. And our entrepreneurs need that interaction, and we provide that.
Let me just get one more question for the panel.
Sure.
Yeah, so last thing, you made the comment, and I think you made it a little bit flippantly, we could always purchase the property and triple our revenues, right? And so I would just encourage you to...
Triple profit, yes.
Right, I would encourage you to be very tactful and be very purposeful, and just be cautious about making kind of comments that are a little bit flippant like that, right? Because again, it comes back to believability. Actually, the way that you answered that question at the end there, in kind of the secret sauce of bringing these healthcare professionals together and what they need, right? If that could come across a little bit more early on, right, and get me to stick a little bit,
Okay.
then it'll cause much more engagement, I think. When
Thank you.
you know.
All right, Eric,
I have a
Kirsch.
quick plug.
I'm sorry?
Quick plug.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, if anybody's planning on going to that big health tech conference in a few weeks in the Charlotte area, and you are a fan of Mito Station, I have T-shirts if you want to wear one or two. We're going to have our official announcement of our grand opening. Thank you.
All right, thanks.